Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Med Safety Exchange webinar series, a joint venture by the Institute for Safe Medication Practices Canada, ISMP Canada, and the Canadian Patient Safety Institute, CPSI. The webinar will be recorded, and the link to the recording will be posted on the Med Safety Exchange website about a week later. We do have all the lines muted, so we encourage any questions or comments to be typed to us in the chat box, and then we'll read them out loud at the end of the webinar during the discussion period. The purpose of this webinar series is to encourage reporting, sharing, and learning of medication incidents and medication safety topics so that we can bridge the silos in healthcare and optimize med safety in all care sites. As a reminder, to garner as much feedback as possible, we've developed several new questions for the post-webinar survey. But since we don't want you to have to answer more than a few at a time, we will be rotating the questions. So please ensure that you read each question each time because they won't be the same webinar to webinar. And you will have multiple opportunities to respond to these questions, including the poll at the end of the live webinar that's shown on the right panel, the pop-up web page after you close the webinar window, which looks like this, as well as the attachment in the thank you for attending email about a week later. So now for today's overview. This webinar will hear about an incident of digoxin overdose and a look at the importance of medication safety from a family member's perspective. This will be followed by an observatory with updates from Health Canada on prac-spined labeling and from CPSI. At the end, we'll have a discussion period where we read out your comments and keep the learning going. As always, anonymity is an option for all those involved in the webinar, so I'll only introduce speakers briefly, and they can choose to share as much or as little as they'd like about themselves and or their practice site. I'd now like to ask our first speaker to describe an incident where too much digoxin was given and some of the factors that potentially contributed to this error.
Thank you, Ambika. This is a case that I think I will always remember in my career because it was very tragic and it was very highly preventable. So I have quite a few slides, warp speed through them, so you can sit back and say, that would never happen at our facility. Our nurses would never do that, and our pharmacists would have caught that. So we didn't think it would happen here, but it did, and it was a good nurse. We weren't concerned about the nurse's education, experience, judgment, or knowledge base. It was a good nurse that made the mistake. Something went wrong that day, and still a good nurse. The case was an older patient received an intravenous loading dose of digoxin for uncontrolled tachycardia. The usual therapy is a beta blocker. Was contraindicated because of the underlying COPD, Within an hour or to hour and 15 of initiating the digoxin infusion, the patient appeared to be in ventricular fibrillation. The patient was found unresponsive, no pulse, no respirations. The code blue was called. The code blue came and tried to do their thing. They're intubated, resuscitated, but that was unsuccessful. So at that point, they thought nothing had gone wrong. But the following morning, the pharmacy was alerted to that the Pyxis machine had indicated a need to restock the IV dig on this medical unit. 5 ampules of digoxin 0.5 milligrams in 2 mLs had been removed. So the pharmacist went to the unit manager talked to the staff nurse, and they decided an error had occurred and a review was initiated. This hospital uses Pyxis machines to access medications on the unit. Now, normally the nurse logs in, enters the patient name, and selects the medication, and the door pops open. But that isn't what happened in this scenario. The nurse logged in, entered the patient's name, and hit override. And then they could select the medication drawer that they wanted to come out. Because the nurse had not sent the orders down to pharmacy to have it put into the Pyxis machine. So the override drugs are for life-critical drugs, Benadryl, epinephrine, things that need to be given right away, but they don't need to be justified in Pyxis. So a dose had been miscalculated. Digoxin 250 micrograms IV had been ordered, but digoxin 2.5 milligrams or 2,500 micrograms IV had administered. So 10 times the dose had been administered. So 5 ampules were missing from the Pyxis machine. The vital signs were not monitored after administration, and the patient was transferred to another unit for telemetry after the DIG load had been initiated. So the prescribing went wrong, the preparation went wrong, the administration went wrong, and the monitoring went wrong. So we could have done things differently in any one of those cases and made a different outcome. So the potential contributing factors were lack of familiarity and experience with IV digoxin, an inconsistent use of micrograms and milligrams for digoxin, an infrequent conversion between micrograms and milligrams, a lack of an independent check whether with another nurse or a pharmacist didn't take place, the high number of ampules available in Pyxis, and no maximum allowable quantity in Pyxis, and a lack of vital sign monitoring. All those things went wrong. We'll break it down and look at each one. The lack of familiarity and experience with digoxin. I interviewed 3 nurses that had collectively 15 years of experience on this particular medical ward, and none of them had ever seen IV dig given on this unit. They'd given IV metapropyl quite frequently, but never IV digoxin. There was a lack of perceived risk in administering this drug, and they all could pull out their smartphones and pull up their calculators and figure it out for me, whereas my pharmacist could look at it and say, oh, we just need to move that decimal 3 points to the left. The inconsistent use of micrograms and milligrams, it depends on the doctor who's ordering and how they order it. This was the order that the nurse took as a telephone order, digoxin 250 micrograms IV now and 250 micrograms in 6 hours. The nurse transcribed it onto the medication record as, and there was a mix-up there in terms of how the micrograms and milligrams. Then the product is at the bottom, and that's very hard to read. So we'll take a closer look at that one. So everything on the ampule is in milligrams. There's nothing about microgram conversion. The digoxin IV monograph that was available to the nurse that day had nothing about micrograms. It was all, again, in milligrams, and there wasn't a conversion of how to do that. It is still totally unclear to us how the total volume was calculated. Then a lack of independent double check. The ISMP list of high alert medications in acute care settings has digoxin on that list and requires a second check. But at this facility and in this region, digoxin did not appear on a list for high alert medications, and a double check was not initiated or needed for calculation, preparation, or administration. The high number of ampules available in Pyxis. The Pyxis drawer had between 10 and 12 ampules on a unit where they never had heard of giving IV dig. But we believe that this biased the nurse into thinking that maybe more was needed. The no maximum allowable in quantity in Pyxis. Like Pyxis doesn't shout off bells and whistles or an alarm that you've taken too much dig, that you're now in a danger zone. So that doesn't, Pyxis can't do that, so they didn't know. The nurse felt very stressed because of giving that this was ordered now. At this facility, at this hospital, now and stat are seen as the same thing. So the nurse saw that as stat. But in my nursing experience, now and stat are different. And in the literature, there's a bit of a difference too. Stat is urgent, it needs to be given, it's a crisis situation, but a now is an urgent drug too, but it can be a little bit slower. My thought was it was always within an hour to give a now, but even literature goes to an hour and a half is a now order. So the nurse felt very stressed with trying to give it right away. Okay. The other thing was the lack of vital sign monitoring that took place, and it actually didn't take place. That was what the problem was. Some of the information on the IV monograph was some of the side effects, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, that kind of thing. But they really didn't get into the toxic symptoms or an antidote if the patient was toxic. So that was another contributing factor. Then we looked at the recommendations to try to deal with these things that we found. So we thought maybe developing a de-identified patient learning summary for the nursing staff, pharmacy staff, and the region to learn from this event that had taken place. But that's still in draft form because those are in this region posted on the public website for them to read, so then that needs specific sensitive language around it for the public to understand. The next strategy was to enhance the Digoxin monograph. So now it includes conversions for easy calculations of micrograms to milligrams. That's already there, and it includes the last IV monograph includes monitoring of the patient, heart rate, blood pressure, O2 sats at before administering, at 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 1 hour after the dose. So those are now in the IV monograph. The monographs, we're in process of creating a new monograph, and they all go to a central place, and then the person has to go around to each individual unit in the hospital, and they go into paper binders that are in the med room. And it takes a while to have all that happen. So we tried to clean up that distribution of those monographs. This is a facility that likes their paper. We had considered whether we should go to an electronic format that could be, all those monographs could be in an iPad right at the Pyxis machine, but that's been explored and wasn't deemed to be functional. To optimize the stock of Digoxin, nursing and pharmacy met collaboratively. Instead of 10 to 12 ampules in the Pyxis machine now, I think they have it down to 5 or 6, and they have restricted the overrides during pharmacy hours. Pharmacy stocks the machine so that the nursing unit will have available to them what they need if it's a weekend, a night, an evening, a holiday, when pharmacy might not be readily available. But this was not a night, an evening, or weekend, or holiday. This was a Monday to Friday, 7 to 3. Pharmacy was fully staffed, and so pharmacy was fully staffed and available to help with this preparation. So nurses were quite surprised that you could even get Dig out on an override, because they were complaining you can't even get an extra strength Tylenol or an Imodium, and yet here you could get life-threatening Digoxin. They're looking at standardizing the units of measure to consider standardizing the units for Digoxin to milligrams instead of micrograms in this facility. The dose calculations from micrograms to milligrams will now could be included in the order entry system, and the pharmacy needs to enter the order for the calculation to be available and appear in Pyxis screen. So in the Pyxis screens, they can, for oral doses of Digoxin, which you could overdose there too, it can be put into Pyxis. But for an IV drug, Pyxis is not able to do that. I don't know. Pyxis isn't as smart as we think it is. So the last thing that we're doing as a region is we're implementing a double check for Digoxin. Digoxin has been added to the high alert medication list, and it now will require probably an independent double check for loading doses. So we're hoping that these recommendations will prevent this, hopefully, from happening again. And maybe you can look at some of these things and create a little bit better process at your facility, and because it could happen to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing this case with us and for the thorough list of potential contributing factors. As with recent webinars, although everything that was presented is important, we've developed a few key learning points for the audience, like the title of the case, how many is too many. The need for more than a few vials of a product to make up a dose should trigger the practitioner to confirm if their thought process is correct. The importance of consistency within your facility regarding the units of measure for particular medications like Digoxin in this case, or even other medications like levothyroxine. And the need for technology and systems to help alert us to an error where possible. We also have some questions to consider as you reflect on the learning from this presentation and how it can impact your work. So what do the different healthcare practitioners in your facility believe is meant by STAT versus now versus ASAP? And how does your organization convey dose conversions, so milligrams or micrograms, and for liquid medications, the equivalent milliliters? And what tools or checks do you have in your system to support those safe conversions? I'd now like to ask our second speaker to share her journey for positive change in incident reporting following the passing of her son from a compounding error.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Sheldrick, and I became a patient safety advocate about 3 years ago. Our son, Andrew, was taken from us because someone made a grave error one day in March of 2016. That person took the wrong bottle from the shelf of the pharmacy and mixed Andrew's prescription. Let me tell you a little bit about Andrew because he's the reason that I'm here with you today. Andrew was a typical little boy who loved building and destroying towers. He could identify an approaching train by its sound, and he was always on the move. Andrew had a contagious giggle, and when he was younger, it was because he was amused, but as he grew a little older, it was because he was into some kind of mischief. After he died, we heard from his friends at school that he was an incredibly caring kid. Andrew's teacher tells us that there was a boy in the class who suffered some emotional and behavioral problems, and one particular day he was having difficulty. She tells us that Andrew came beside him and said, "Hey dude, you look like you're having a bad day. Want to go play?" The boy immediately calmed down, and the two of them took the soccer ball and went to the field. Andrew was an avid sports lover, and soccer was his favorite. However, he knew the standings of many teams in hockey, baseball, and basketball. While most kids watched cartoons on TV in the morning, Andrew watched the sports reels so that he and his dad could talk about it over breakfast. It wasn't until January 2013 that we had any concerns with his development. Andrew began having severe behavioral issues at home at age 5.5. It took 9 months of doctors and counselors and behavior specialists before the sleep doctor analyzed Andrew's sleep study, which showed he had a sleep disorder called parasomnia, which refers to all the abnormal things that can happen to people when they sleep. In Andrew's case, it was that he went into his REM sleep twice as fast as normal, which caused him to wake in the night screaming and crying. When the doctor told us about a medication that was not commonly used in children but highly effective, we were very interested. We were told that tryptophan is an amino acid, so it was not a drug at all, and that it was found in food that we eat every day, but also that there were no known dangerous side effects. This sounded like it was worth a try. She prescribed him a dosage that required him to take the equivalent of 5 tablets a night. The results were virtually immediate. Andrew's night waking stopped and his behavior improved. The following year at age 7, we repeated the sleep study and it showed the same result. The doctor instructed us to remain on the dosage if that was what worked. When she did, I explained to her how difficult it was for Andrew to take the chalky tablets, so she suggested I find a compound pharmacy nearby and have the prescription made into liquid form. I took the prescription and they were able to do so. What a relief. There were only 2 instructions, that it had to be kept refrigerated and that it had a 2-week shelf life, so we had to refill it every 2 weeks. We did this for 18 months. On Friday, March 11, 2016, I knew I needed to call for a refill for Saturday pickup, which we did, and promptly brought it home to the refrigerator where it stayed until bedtime. I gave him the dose, kissed him goodnight, and tucked him in. And what unfolded the next morning is what nightmares are made of. For 4 months, we didn't know why Andrew died. We told ourselves that this was some kind of a grand plan that no one consulted us about. And then we received a call from the homicide division of the police department to come in, give a statement, and meet with the coroner. It was then that we learned that the bottle of medication that the police seized from our fridge on Sunday, March 13th contained no tryptophan at all, but contained only baclofen, mixed to the same concentration as Andrew's prescription, 3 times the lethal dose for an adult. The coroner suspected that an error was made at the dispensing level, but could not be sure at that time. Further investigations were conducted by police and ISMP, and it was concluded that this was an error made at the pharmacy level. The immediate grief and trauma rushed back, drowning us in sorrow. And then came the anger that someone had actually ended the life of our son. Someone was not paying attention, and this had cost the life of our little boy. That anger drove me to think about how this could have possibly happened and what would become of the pharmacist who made this mistake. How would the pharmacist and the pharmacy be held to account? Then I discovered that if the pharmacist didn't tell anybody about their mistake and what had happened to Andrew and to our family, no one would know. I discovered there was no accountability on the pharmacy and the pharmacist to make changes so that this could not and would not happen again. I discovered that reporting such a devastating mistake was left to professional judgment. All this despite there being a regulatory body to oversee pharmacy policy and procedures. To me, this was not good enough. Not good enough for Andrew, not good enough for our family, and not good enough for the rest of the population who trust pharmacists every single day to provide them with the correct medication. I couldn't live with even the idea that nothing would change and another pharmacy could make a mistake that cost a life or caused harm and no one would know. So I turned to the internet and began a petition on change.org requesting that our Minister of Health mandate all community pharmacies to report their errors to a third party for the collection of aggregate data and analysis. I also started to advocate on social media and began a Facebook page called Andrew's Allies. I began both the page and petition in September 2016, and with the help of my local politicians and the support of local and national media, word spread quickly. In November 2016, our family met with the Minister of Health, and he guided me to the Ontario College of Pharmacists to create a medication incident reporting program whereby all community pharmacies in Ontario will be mandated to anonymously report all incidents and near misses to a third party for data collection and analysis. The OCP contacted me in January 2017 and invited me to be part of the task force to brainstorm ideas, needs, and considerations for this program. But I was also included to put a face and a concrete reason as to why this program is a necessity. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here with you today. On June 19th, 2017, Andrew's 10th birthday, I was able to tell social media and widespread media that the Council of the Ontario College of Pharmacists had overwhelmingly supported this program and would begin early implementation immediately. In January 2018, I had the privilege of being part of the team to help in the training of the 100 champion pharmacists who would be a part of the first phase of the program and help shape it. The rest of the province will benefit from the early work that these ambassadors have done when full implementation of the platform is rolled out, which is currently in progress. Ontario's program is called AIMS, Assurance and Improvement in Medication Safety, and it is a medication safety and quality assurance program that will support continuous improvement. It puts in place a mandatory consistent standard for medication safety for all community pharmacies across the province. It has 4 components that pharmacists must fulfill in the effort to reduce harm and increase patient safety. To record errors and near misses anonymously to a third party, to document the details at store level. Pharmacy teams then analyze errors and brainstorm the next steps to remediate the situation and to prevent recurrence. And lastly, pharmacy professionals share the learning to all team members. It is a program that is not a quick fix, but strives to put in place long-term, lasting solutions. It is designed to find gaps and to identify trends. It is the exact change that I fought for in Andrew's honor, but also in the protection of others. In addition, the A and the S are deliberately placed and made dark blue to include Andrew's initials into the logo. For me, the bottom line is that if these regulations had been in place, if there was a culture and a practice in community pharmacies of reporting errors and sharing best practices and information on preventing errors, if there wasn't a culture of shame and blame, then maybe Andrew would be here today. I strive to make a difference in the life of another family, which I believe is Andrew's living legacy. I'd like to fill you in on some of the work I've been doing since I began my campaign. When I began researching into error reporting, I discovered that only the province of Nova Scotia had such a quality improvement program in Canada. Since 2016, I'm proud to say that there are now 5 provinces in Canada that have standardized mandatory CQI programs in place, and BC just voted a similar program in just last week. This summer, I took my campaign to Australia and worked with the professionals there to share my story of why medication safety is critical. At the end of my week of speaking to consumers, politicians, and other stakeholders, the Federal Minister of Health announced that he would be making medication safety a national health priority. We've seen success from Nova Scotia's program, Safety Net RX, As you can see, gathering similar data from across the country and the globe will drive change and improve patient safety. The objective to reducing preventable errors must be to adopt a systems approach and not a person approach when dealing with incidents. A person approach focuses on what the person did wrong and blames them, whereas a systems approach concentrates on examining the conditions the person works under, the training that's in place, and the supports that they have. This system aims to build preventative measures, and this is where anonymous error reporting comes into play. How are change and learning supposed to happen if no one knows what is going wrong? We have to take the shame and blame out of medication incidents in order to see the big picture, to look for trends, to find the gaps. We know that we cannot expect to eliminate human error in healthcare or anywhere else for that matter. However, if we correct some mistakes, then they won't be made again, thereby reducing the number of errors and reducing the amount of potential harm to patients. When incidents are logged over time, there may be patterns that wouldn't have been noticed unless they were documented. Gaps are identified when incidents are logged and analyzed. It's time to change the way the industry sees mistakes. Healthcare providers need to acknowledge their actions and move forward. Teams must support each other and work together to examine why an incident occurred and to discuss how it can be rectified and be prevented from recurring. Embedding a just and safe culture in healthcare is essential to keeping people safe. Communication is perhaps the most important tool that health professionals can use. You must maintain a system of ensuring clear communication lines with patients and caregivers, doctors, pharmacists, nurses, transition teams, and your staff. It is only through that improvement will happen. Throughout this journey and the learning that I've acquired, I've come to learn that my voice has power. The tragedy that our family endured caught the attention of many people very quickly. When I began to read stories and see programs started by patients, I realized that there's an important place for my perspective in the healthcare industry. In 2015, a national consultation found that more needs to be done to increase patient engagement in organizations and the healthcare system. This is a real shift in the way practice has occurred in the past, and we know that change is not easy. Yesterday's World Patient Safety Day made that message loud and clear. Here are the key learning points. There is a human life directly affected with every decision you make as a healthcare provider. You are making an impact on their being, one of the most important jobs. Collaboration and communication are key to increasing patient safety. You are not alone. Work in your team with transition teams and speak openly about med safety concerns. Establish a safety culture within your mindset and embed it into your practice every day. Ensure there is a workflow whereby teams work together to minimize and eradicate preventable errors. Help each other when an error is made. Don't point fingers, but lend support and find ways to prevent reoccurrence. The med safety exercise involves the following questions. What is one thing you can do in your practice to increase patient safety? How can you use the patient experience to shape the care you deliver? How will you embed patient safety as a core value in your practice? What is it that you need to embody in order for your colleagues to know that patient safety is a top priority? Thank you for hearing my message. Thank you for realizing that this is not just one more thing for you to do in the day, but that this is building something much bigger. Incident recording will save lives. Lessons learned now will protect people, parents, grandparents, siblings, children from now on. You will be more knowledgeable and better supported with a network of best practices that you can learn from and contribute to. Be champions of quality improvement and patient-centered care and encourage your colleagues and peers to be part of this change too. You have the opportunity to make a real change here, so please use your voice and make it heard. Andrew's caring legacy is why medication error reporting is so important to prevent future errors. When you go back to your workplaces, remember my story and the life of my beautiful boy. With the data that is collected, innumerable systemic changes can be made to increase patient safety. I hope that my story helps you believe that one person can make a difference. You can make a difference. You can be the change you wish to see. Thank you.
Melissa, thank you so much for sharing and for everything that you've done to bring medication incident reporting forward in Canada and shine a light on the need for safer medication practices. And thank you for the key learning points and the med safety exercise for reflection. To our audience, although this incident and the reporting requirements apply to community pharmacy, hopefully you can see how applicable the learning and the reflection is to all types of care sites and all types of healthcare providers. So we'll now get into the observatory for some quick med safety updates. First up is Health Canada to give us an update on a recent labeling and packaging concern.
Thanks for that, Ambika. Hi there, my name is Christy Shortall-Kane, and I'm a pharmacist working in the patient safety section of the Marketed Health Products Directorate of Health Canada. Health Canada reviews medication incidents where a drug product's name, label, or package may have contributed to an error. The report of concern that we would like to bring forward and discuss with you today is a report of concern that was about Praxbind. So Health Canada received a report from a healthcare professional involving a patient who had suffered an intracranial hemorrhage. Praxbind, or idarucizumab, was ordered with directions to give 5 grams, or 2 by 2.5 grams, IV for 1 dose. When the box of Praxbind was opened, it was reported that the lack of full information on the vial caused confusion and a delay in the administration. At the time Health Canada received this report of concern, this was the marketed outer label that you see on the slide. Praxbind, as you know, is an antidote that's specific for Pradaxa or Digoxin. It's indicated for adults treated with Pradaxa when rapid specific reversal of the anticoagulant effects of Digoxin is required for emergency surgery, urgent procedures, or life-threatening or uncontrolled bleeding. Praxbind was issued a marketing authorization with conditions by Health Canada back in 2016, and it was pending final clinical trial results to verify its reversal effect in patients and promising evidence of clinical benefit. The recommended dose of Praxbind is 5 grams. It's provided in a carton as 2 separate vials, each containing 2.5 grams of idarucizumab per 50 mils. The complete dose of 5 grams is administered intravenously as 2 consecutive infusions over 5 to 10 minutes each, or as a bolus injection. Administration of the contents of 2 or both of the vials represents a complete dose. No dose adjustment is required. This was the product's inner label at the time the report was received by Health Canada. Back in June of 2016, Health Canada published the Good Label and Package Practices Guide for Prescription Drugs. It was meant to be provide best practices information to sponsors, manufacturers, and license holders in designing safe and clear labels and packages. It's known that an unclear expression of strength or missing expression of strength can impede or slow down the selection and use of products. Now, Praxbind is a small volume parenteral product, which means that the total volume is less than 100 mils. And this guide, this good label and Package Practices Guide advises that the label for these small volume parenteral products express the total volume of medicinal ingredient per total volume and the amount of medicinal ingredient per mil. The total milligrams per total volume should be the more prominent of these two expressions of strength. For this product, it's recommended that the quantity of idarucizumab per mil, so 50 milligrams per mil in this case, as well as the total amount of idarucizumab per total volume, so 2.5 grams per 50 ml vial, be presented on the label. The label showing the strength expressed as 50 milligrams per ml only. The total strength per vial, the 2.5 grams per 50 ml, isn't presented on the inner or the outer label. So this is a picture of the revised outer label, the carton of Praxbind. These changes that were agreed upon between Health Canada and the manufacturer were that the front panel of the outer label was updated with a statement, as you'll see there, that says administer 2 vials for a complete dose of 5 grams, as well as that the expression of total strength per total volume, the 2.5 grams per 50 ml, be added and be followed by a less prominent strength of the 50 milligrams per ml. This is a picture of the revised inner. The revised inner label also has the total strength per total volume more prominent, followed by the less prominent strength expressed per milligram per ml. As you'll note on the right, the dose has been highlighted in light blue. You know, if you do have a report of concern, something like you'd like to bring forward, there are sort of 3 routes that you can take. You can always report to the manufacturer of the product. You can report to us, to Health Canada, at that web address that you see there. And you can report to ISMP Canada at the web address on the screen. And at that, I'll pass it back to you, Ambika.
Great, thank you so much. I remember connecting with your team when we received reports of this concern, so it's great to see how you're able to work with the company to make the directions much clearer. So now we'll have CPSI give us an update on their recent med safety initiatives.
Thank you, Ambika, and hello, everyone. A reminder that 4 educational PowerPoint modules are now available online for all stakeholders in the health system to utilize in understanding, promoting, and implementing the reporting requirements for serious adverse drug reactions and medical device incidents as mandated by Vanessa's law. Module 1 provides an overview of the legislation and reporting requirements. Module 2 explains reporting processes to Health Canada. Module 3 provides strategies to promote and support mandatory reporting. And Module 4 gives an overview of Health Canada's review and communication of safety findings. Please feel free to visit our website to learn more and contact CPSI, HSO, or ISMP Canada if you have any questions about the modules or if you'd like suggestions on how to effectively use them within your organization. Specific questions about Vanessa's law and the mandatory requirements should be directed to Health Canada. Our second update is that CPSI and ISMP Canada are thrilled to launch 2 new medication safety self-assessments with a focus on the pharmaceutical never events. The assessments are designed for 2 different care settings, hospitals and ambulatory care centers and long-term care, and include a total of 48 items divided into 7 sections. Section 1 focuses on known never events, and Section 2 on general strategies for safety, and Sections 2 through 7 focus on selected high alert medication classes. Both assessments are free to use and will allow you to identify areas of opportunity for medication safety improvement within your organization, as well as track your progress over time. Please visit ISMB Canada's website to register or contact us for more information. Thanks, and back to you, Ambika.
Great, thank you so much, Steve. Both excellent outputs that we can all learn from. So just taking a look at the time, we will try to get through as many of the questions as possible, but as a reminder, if we don't, we will try to reach back out to the presenters and provide written answers where we can.
Thank you, Ambika. We've had some excellent presentations today. And I'll address these first few questions to the presenter on the Digoxin case, which I thought was very interesting. The first question is, it would seem that some of your strategies might apply to other drugs as well. Are you taking steps so that this doesn't happen with these other drugs? And are there perhaps other drugs that have potentially too much stock in your Pyxis?
Thank you for that question. I think that's a very good question, and it's something that the site needs to look at. I'm the investigator of this particular event. Then I take my results, and my report goes to the site, so it goes to the CMO, the CNO, everybody involved, and it goes to regional people to look at as well to see if they need to make any changes. And it is very, very likely could be applicable to many other drugs.
And a second question for you is math is always more difficult in the middle of an urgency and is the source of a number of errors that we ourselves have investigated in our facility. And this facility always encourages nurses or pharmacists to call someone else to double check math, but at this point they haven't made that mandatory yet. This person has also heard of facilities that mandate doing any math or conversions on the paper MAR or chart, or, in other words, show their work to have it available for review. Did your facility consider this, and do you have any thoughts on whether or not that would be useful?
Well, I think that they don't advocate that they write on the MAR, because if you write on the MAR one time, what if the next time the supplier has changed and the medication amounts have changed on the vial? So that isn't encouraged, but for sure, I think that they need to look at having it double checked. And this was during the day. There were plenty of people around that this nurse could have checked with. They could have called pharmacy. This could have been double checked.
And a third question for you, a lot of great work here. How are you or your facility going to evaluate the effectiveness of these interventions?
Well, I'm the reviewer, and the evaluator, but the site will have to determine how they're going to review and to see if these recommendations are applicable. I make them from a theoretical kind of perspective. Will they actually work? In reality, I do not know. And part of what will tell us is if this kind of an event happens again. But it will be up to the site to determine that evaluation.
Thank you so much. And now we'll turn our attention to Melissa and you and Andrew's story. We've had a number of comments thanking you come in, and I'll just maybe read a representative one. Thank you for sharing Andrew's and your family's story. Sometimes we in healthcare, as practitioners, we get bogged down in the day-to-day work and we forget about how we really impact patients. And to your point, sometimes change happens so slowly in healthcare it can get very frustrating. But thank you for pointing out that why this is all important. And I do have a few questions for you, Melissa. One from a respondent. I am both saddened and inspired by your story, and I sincerely appreciate you telling us about it. From your perspective as a patient, a caregiver, where does healthcare need to get better in terms of safety, and what would you like to see happen in healthcare safety?
Yeah, well, this is a huge question, but it really needs to start with authentic patient engagement opportunities that are going to help to mold and improve systems, because patients have such a unique perspective that no education can teach you except for lived experience. And to really listen to what matters to each patient, not what you assume they need or how they're feeling. Communicating is so important, and respecting the opinions of colleagues when there is an error, really listening actively to each other. And in terms of what I'd like to see happen is just complete transparency and sharing of these learnings, improvements in e-health so patients can have control of their own information. And again, really patient engagement is key for me.
And a question related to that is a bit of a follow-up. Thank you very much for your story. How hard was it to get information about what happened, and what sort of roadblocks did you run into, and what advice would you give to us healthcare workers about how to sensitively deal with patients and families coping with and trying to understand an episode of harm that happened to them?
It was hard to put the pieces together of what happened in our case, because there was a 4.5-month gap between the time that we lost Andrew and the time that we knew what happened. So ISMP was really instrumental in putting together a comprehensive report that put some pieces together for us. And when I started looking to programs for error reporting and safety programs, there wasn't a lot online. There were some news media, and there was some information from Nova Scotia, but they were still fairly young in their program. So I'm grateful that there were not a lot of roadblocks. Media picked it up quickly and put pressure on the Minister of Health, who got the ball rolling. And I think the most important thing for me is, if there's an error that happens, communication is key. Offering an apology and communicating how you're going to prevent it from recurring, and offering to help the family in any way. Really just listening what that patient has to say and responding to that in an empathetic way. We've never heard from the pharmacy after this, and I don't know now, after all this time, how that would feel or the impact that would make. But I know that in the beginning, we were really waiting and searching for that apology.
Thank you again so much, Melissa. We'll turn our attention to Health Canada now for one last question regarding the packaging. The new packaging is certainly better. Can you comment quickly on how easy it is to get a label change? Is there a process of negotiation, or what sort of evidence do you need to help the process along? I can assume some resistance on the part of the manufacturer for a product that's already on the market.
Hi there. Well, I guess I'd have to say that every product is different, and there's no straight path for each one. So it involves, engaging the manufacturer and discussion back and forth. And I have to say that 9 times out of 10, when we're in discussion with manufacturers and we present a concern, they're willing to listen and to take recommendations, because at the bottom line, it's in their best interest to have safe products out there, and so they're usually very receptive to any back and forth discussion. But I have to say that no one product is exactly the same as the next that we work on, so I can't say that there's a straight path for everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you all. And as I mentioned, we do have a few unanswered questions that we will try to provide written answers for. And thank you to our presenters for all the excellent learning shared today, and to our participants for asking these insightful questions and really keeping the learning going. I do want to again share these excellent suggestions for presentation topics that we received from you. So please reach out to us if you have something to share related to one or more of these topics, and we can work with you to develop a presentation. and it can be as short as 5 minutes. We just really think it's important to share any of your experiences and your learning so that we can all optimize patient care and safety. And we do want everyone to be part of the Med Safety Exchange, so whether it's an incident analysis or a med safety initiative, please email us to share the learning. And please don't forget to fill out the poll that's now available on your right panel. And a reminder that the questions will be changing each time, so please read through them carefully. Again, the link to the recording of this webinar will be available on the Med Safety Exchange website next week, along with any resources provided by the presenters, and the PDF of the slides is available upon request to the email address on the screen. Registration for the next webinar on Wednesday, November 20th is now open, so you can head over to the website to sign up. Thank you again to all our speakers for the important analyses and the strategies shared today, and to our participants for your questions and helping us to share the learning. A belated World Patient Safety Day to everyone, and I hope it helped raise awareness in your practice sites and will encourage everyone to speak up for safety. Have a good one.